When Dr. Githinji Gitahi was born in 1970, his mother was detained in hospital for about a week because she did not have the 40 shillings required as delivery fee. More so, she did not have any clothes to dress her young baby boy. 50 years on, he finds himself at a position where he can make change in the health sector, not just in Kenya, but globally. For him, it hasn't been luck, but opportunities that have found him prepared.
My name is Dr. Githinji Gitahi, and I'm the Global CEO for Amref Health Africa. To say I'm the first Kenyan Global CEO for Amref Health Africa in a 63 years history, which is a big tick for Kenya and for leadership generally. And I was born in a small village called Karima in Othaya in Nyeri County, where I was born in 1970, so just turned 50. And when I was born to the eighth born to my mother and my father. I was number 8 and hoped I would be the last, but then we got my lovely sister thereafter. So I was last born for almost 7 years. And then, we got a little sister, not so little now. And then after that, I was brought up there in Karima. My mother was a subsistence farmer. And my father worked in Nairobi as a tailor then. And we went to the local school called Gatuge Primary School. I know, my mother reflects on the fact that when she gave birth to me in the Othaya then health center, she couldn't pay the 40 shillings needed at that point. Now we're talking about universal health coverage. But even in 1970, my mother was required to pay 40 shillings after giving birth to me, for me to be released. She couldn't find it, therefore she was actually detained in the hospital for several days. Before then, she had someone who could get her the 40 for us to be released. And also, she didn't have clothes to get me out of the hospital. Oh, no. Yeah, so she had no clothes. So she waited also to get clothes, and then she ended up getting, one of my sisters had done home science and knitted a sweater as part of the home science. So she's like, that's what was brought, but it was too tiny. So she split it on the side so that it could fit me, yes. So later, I moved on from Gatuge Primary to Nyeri High School as a young man of about 14 years. And I studied in Nyeri High School, and that's the farthest I had been out of my village, which was maybe 20 kilometers away. And then after Nyeri High School, I moved to Mangu High School. In 1988 as an A-level student at that point, which was the education system, where actually I got into Mangu on a ticket of science, but a ticket of math, physics, and chemistry, which was really supposed to lead me more to the career of architecture, engineering, and things like that. But one morning, just in the first term, the dean of students came to class and said, the math, physics, chemistry class is too congested, and he called out a few of us and told us to follow him. And we followed him to the math, biology, chemistry class without any consultation, but clearly that's how my journey changed from engineering and architecture into medicine. And therefore, I went to, finally, after leaving Mangu, I went and joined the University of Nairobi. In the University of Nairobi, I still go so that I can be able to assist people to navigate law and medicine. But I also had a passion for obstetrics and gynecology, so I was not sure where to go. And obviously, there are also life challenges in terms of where do you get this course, who pays for you, because of course my parents would not have afforded to take me for those trainings. And therefore, I ended up leaving after I did my internship at Kenyatta National Hospital. Then I moved to private sector. So I went to the Avenue Group. At that point, it was Avenue Hospital, and they had just started Avenue Healthcare in Parkland. So I started to do my practice there after my internship, but quickly moved from seeing patients, whereas I developed a very high following of the patients who used to come to Avenue, including starting an antenatal clinic single-handedly, which I used to run every Wednesday. And then I moved into management, and I became the outpatient manager, then I became hospital manager, and then I moved out of clinical practice. That was around 2000 when I went to Madison Insurance, as a medical services manager. And then shortly after moving to Madison, it didn't even take a year before GlaxoSmithKline approached me and said, we are looking for a medical marketing manager. Do you mind joining? The reason this happened is because before I moved to Madison, while I was still at Avenue, I used to provide pro bono services to GlaxoSmithKline to speak on radio in the morning. At that point, people remember Metro FM, KBC. So every morning, my voice used to be on Metro FM at about 7:30, talking about common ailments and how to treat them. And this was courtesy of GlaxoSmithKline at no pay. So it was purely a passion. And I used to record this, every Sunday I record 5 shows and that kind of thing. So I think when I left Avenue, they saw it as an opportunity for me to join Glaxo. And that's how I joined Glaxo as medical services manager. And then while I was there, I developed a very keen interest in marketing, general marketing. So I started getting involved in the marketing activities of the organization beyond just the medical services, getting involved in the marketing of toothpaste and drinks and painkillers. And I decided to undertake an MBA in marketing and strategy, which I did at USAIU. And that is how I moved out of clinical work now, finally, because GlaxoSmithKline sent me to South Africa, and I went to South Africa as an expatriate to still deal with medical marketing and marketing in South Africa. And then I got a call from Nation Media Group to join them as general manager for marketing and circulation. And that was, for me, the clear departure from healthcare to commercial work. But my passion for development and healthcare and human rights and social justice still drew me back to development sector. So while I was at Nation, I started working with Smile Train, which was an organization based in America that was offering cleft surgery for children who are born with cleft lip and palate across Africa. So I worked with Smile Train as vice president, and then I moved to AMREF in 2015, which is where currently I am for the last 5.5 years. I never thought about medicine when I was very young because I thought about basically making people's lives better. I didn't know how, and I didn't know what, but I knew that I always wanted to help and make people's lives better at whatever cost. But somewhere in my late primary school, like towards the end of primary school, my brother, who is currently the Vice Chancellor of University of Nairobi, Professor Kiama Gitahi, had developed a very keen interest in biology. And often, he would wait for the village dogs to die, and when the village dogs are buried, he would wait for 3 or so weeks, and he would actually exhume them. And when you'd exhume them, he would then clean them up, remove all the, all the other soft tissues, and he remains with the spine and the bones of the dog, and he would then put a wire through them and hang them in the room where he used to live. And that kind of started to develop an interest in me of medicine and health sciences. And I actually think that, therefore, when the Dean of Students in Mangu said, come this and end up in medicine, it wasn't a disappointment. It was actually exactly where my heart was. The one thing I would like to say is that because of my education and my background, I would say that our mother was very keen on education and our nutrition, for example, breastfeeding as well, and making sure we had the basic rural food to eat. So I think that because of that, we had a good foundation to go to school. And therefore, when we went to school, we did well. So I would say that prepared us. But I would also say that we had no career guidance as such. So even as we navigated based on our passion and our heart rather than career guidance. So that could have been both a challenge and an opportunity, because as you see, the fact that I moved from a class that would have taken me to engineering and architecture into medicine, if I had a career guidance, maybe I would have been able to say, this is what I want. But the fact that I didn't know led me to medicine, which seems to have been where my heart was. So it's both a challenge and an opportunity for me. But I think that for me, I have not really experienced a lot of challenge in growing my career. As I would reflect, I would say that other than the first job I applied for when I was going to Avenue Healthcare, where I actually applied for a job and went for an interview, I've never actually had to do another interview for a job except on invitation. So all the other jobs since the year 1998 to now have all been on headhunting, invitation, please come and interview for this job. I've never had to sit down and apply for a job. And this is a huge element of luck, but I would like to say, and this is what I reflect on and say, that opportunity requires luck and preparedness. Because the luck could come, but if you're not prepared, then you can't take the opportunity. But also to reflect on the fact that the reason I was headhunted was not because I had a godfather. It's not because somebody said, I want you to call so-and-so. It is because of the brand I had created out there. A brand of passion for whatever I was doing, and a brand of being available and reliable and dependable. What I've learned is that if you follow your heart and you follow the opportunity that you're prepared for, every single opportunity you have trains you something. So when I look at my job now at AMREF, I would not do it half as well as I do it if I didn't go to the media. I would not do it half as well as I do it if I didn't work in pharma. I would not do it half as well as I do it if I didn't work in insurance. So all these are additive, and they form one thing that you couldn't have foreseen. It's not a career that you can train for. And I think what I reflect on is that I was reading a book recently that reflects on the fact that the world is looking more and more for generalists than specialists, where the specialists are required, but the people who are taking up leadership positions are the generalists. So that's a major change. When I look at yourself, you've done medicine, you've gone to journalism, and you're now extremely valuable in that. But it's a difficult thing to have planned earlier in your early life and say, I will do medicine, then do journalism. But listening to your heart led you to a place where, it's very difficult for people to get into. And that's what I find with myself, that as you grow and you grow into leadership, the world is looking for generalists. And these multiple interfaces, which are not forced, they actually happen seamlessly. For me, they happen seamlessly. Moving from Avenue to Madison was seamless. Moving from Madison to GSK was seamless. Moving from there to Nation, because I'd done an MBA, which exposed me beyond medicine to how business runs, financial management, marketing. It was also a good opportunity for me to go and learn beyond sector. What we need to do, and that is, it's something that I was reflecting on recently, exactly that. Because if 50 years ago my mother could not afford 40 shillings, that 40 shillings is the same 7,000 that the mother now cannot afford to get out of hospital. So we really haven't changed. And I think if I reflect on that, I would say somewhere in the 78, 80, early 80s, we were almost getting there with the primary, with the Health for All call after, Alma Ata in 1978. But what happened was that there was a movement away from thinking of human beings as being invested in to thinking of human beings as a cost to a country, and started to think of investments as infrastructure. And that came in the early 80s. Remember, in the mid-80s is when we started to struggle with debt relief, started to struggle with structural adjustment programs in the 90s. And this is where the rain started to beat us, whereas we had actually started to make progress. If you look at primary healthcare in the late 70s and early 80s, it was fairly good. We had health centers, dispensaries, we had no user fees. Actually, it is in the 80s and towards 90s that the user fees was reintroduced as a way of a structural adjustment program to access debt relief, to say, okay, we are now trying to raise some money to run our healthcare through people, and therefore we can be relieved of our debt. Now, that created the big problem we have now, reintroduced the big problem of user fees. So what we are saying now is we need to go back, and I think I have seen global agencies, local agencies, kind of confluence around the fact that human beings are human capital. They're actually capital for the country. And you can look and say that adults earn, healthy adults earn, and healthy children learn. And without learning and earning, a country cannot progress, cannot build this gross domestic product. So now there's a shift to start seeing human capital as a way to a country's development. And that is why now we're seeing health and education as a key factor. But for us to achieve investing in health and education, we need more taxes to be applied to those sectors. We need the government to collect more taxes and apply them to health and education. Not only more taxes and more revenue, but also efficiency. And I think this is the challenge that has also now arisen, that over time, the efficiency of the health sector has declined because competitive politics as we move forward has resulted in this need to create visible infrastructure for health. Whereas we know that actually hardware is not health, software is health. It is the people in their households who create a foundation for health. It is community health workers who create the environment that's enabling for households to be healthy. Then when people get sick, if and when, then you create an infrastructure to take care of them. But we flipped it, and we are seeing now as the infrastructure as health. And this is what we need to reverse for us to go back to primary health care that is founded on community health systems and households, for us to build a just health system for the future. I am married to Kagendo Githinji, and our children are big. Our firstborn daughter is actually turning 25. She's in medical school. Don't ask me why, and I didn't influence it. I asked her, what do you want to do? She said, I want to do medicine. And she, over time, initially she said she had read this book that all kids read of the heart surgeon, and Gifted Hands. And she said, I want to do medicine and be a cardiologist. And then later, over time, she encountered mental health challenges, of her own. And then she said, now, I think mental health is a really big issue. And what I want to do when I grow up is I want to be an adolescent psychologist. So that's her dream right now, because dreams keep changing. Our second-born daughter is doing laboratory medicine at University of Nairobi. Again, no influence of mine. And we have a son who has just finished law in Strathmore. He's just finished his law degree, and but more interested in entrepreneurship than the practice of law. And we have a young boy who is in high school, whose dreams are to become a doctor. I don't know why. I take my time to sit down with my family and have conversation with the family. And then I also take time to walk. I walk a lot. I tend to at least do between 5 and 10 kilometers every day. And that takes me about 2 hours to do. So at the end of the day, I'll drop everything, put on my AirPods or earphones and listen to an audiobook or listen to music or just think and walk around for 2 hours or so. That's what I do when I'm not spending time with the family and my little children. Okay. Yes.